What's up, everybody? How we doing? How we feeling? Welcome to another episode of the FinalVibe podcast. My name is Kevin Reap, and alongside me is my co-host, Andrew White. Andrew, are you ready for episode 29?
I'm super excited for episode 29, but to be fair, I'm super excited about every single episode we've ever done. But let's get into it.
I think you have said that in every episode.
It just feels
real quick,
good
Christmas,
to say.
Less than a week away. The light at the end of the tunnel that is 2020 is in sight. Have you asked Santa for anything fun this year?
Santa and I go really far back, and I've asked for nothing this year, just to sort of maintain my reputation for being a low-maintenance customer.
Wow, I like that. All right.
Yeah, what about you, Kevin? Do you have any Christmas lists?
I asked for clothes.
Okay,
which
nice, yeah.
It's kind of exciting these days, you know?
New socks?
Yeah. Okay, the FinalVibe podcast is all about the pursuit of legacy, and we explore all aspects of life and legacy through discussions with all walks of life. And today, we are thrilled to have Adam Tilley joining the show remotely. Adam is a husband, a father, and a financial advisor in Sedalia, Missouri, which is home of the Missouri State Fair and the closest Mr. Goodcents to Columbia. Adam, welcome to the FinalVibe podcast.
Thanks, Kevin. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. So let's just jump right in. Over the last 6 months or so since we've been doing the podcast, Andrew and I have talked to some incredible people ranging from all different backgrounds. And the goal of our podcast is meet people who are doing impressive things and then figure out why they do them, how they do them, and focusing on the bigger picture of the legacy left behind along the way. Adam, you and I talked a couple months ago about finances and how in our culture, so much of our legacy really is or can be intertwined with finances. Retirement, life insurance, savings, debt, buying houses, inheritance, investments, all of those things are key focus points for people sometime throughout their life. And some of these decisions they make major impacts on the legacy that we are able to leave behind. I'm going to do the cliche thing and quote the dictionary. Merriam-Webster actually defines legacy as a gift of will, especially of money or other personal property. So we've expanded on that definition a bit at FinalVibe, and we go a little past the physical items that are left behind, but it's still important and potentially life-changing for those who will come after us. And it might be one of the most important aspects of legacy, is the financial aspect of our lives. So that's a long-winded way to describe why you were on the show. I think it would be best if we started with your personal journey to get to where you are today. So let's touch on that, and then we will talk about your personal philosophy behind money and legacy, and then we'll talk about the specifics of the day-to-day life of a financial advisor. So our listeners can better equip themselves to be prepared for whatever the next steps are in their personal financial journey. So let's start. How did you become a financial advisor in Sedalia, Missouri?
Good question, Kevin. I feel like I first have to interject, and one of the traits that I have that you didn't mention is that I am a FinalVibe member. So
that's true. That's so true. Yes.
I don't think I know exactly which number I am, but maybe 17-ish.
I can tell you really quick.
But anyway, happy to be a FinalVibe member, and I'm enjoying all the content regularly. So it's good stuff. So how did I become a financial advisor? It was really a pretty straightforward approach. So I, like so many of your guests, went to Mizzou, and that's how the three of us met. And I went as an undeclared business major. I wasn't exactly sure what I'd want to do. I thought actually that I would want to get into real estate, and in particular real estate finance. Kind of a weird path, but that's actually where my high school job was. I worked for a title insurance company, and it's kind of a unique perspective on an industry that a lot of people don't think about. But I kind of lucked into a good internship with a financial advisor, and had a great opportunity to just shadow this advisor for a whole summer. And I loved the way that he ran his business and how he treated people and how he was able to live his life. And so that became what I for sure wanted to do, and ended up out of college working for the same firm that I am now, and have been kind of doing that ever since.
So, what does the day-to-day life look like of a financial advisor, somebody who has that title and gets to spend their days and nights thinking about other people's money? What does that mean, and what does that look like?
So, a day in the life of a financial advisor. So, in my office, which I am the advisor in my office, we regularly will have in-person appointments with our clients, and more often than not, these are review appointments. Where we are kind of documenting different goals, talking about different strategies. We're finding out over our relationship, we're finding out what's important to our clients, and we're trying to cater a financial strategy to their values and their goals, and that's what we do every day. So. It consists of some appointments that are in office right now, quite a few that are via Zoom, and then lots of phone calls. So we keep tabs on our people via the phone a lot too.
So Adam, maybe I'm a fool, but does anyone come to you and say, Adam, I would really like to not be wealthy in my later years of life. In those golden years, I really want to be poorly off, and I don't want to have all the fun that my friends are having. So when you say that people have goals, do people generally have the same goals? And if they have different goals, to what extent are they different? And what are the most common things that people seem to want with their long-term financial investments?
Sure. I think that's a really good question, and we're hopping right into what I'd hope we talk about. So when I onboard a new client, we start the conversation about goals and values with money. And almost by default, with a lot of the money that we handle, retirement is technically a goal. Retirement for people looks very different. It might be retiring from a full-time job and then kind of living the part-time retirement life, or it might be moving to a lake house, or it might be retirement can just be a state of financial independence. And I think I'm finding that's more what people's idea is of what their goal is. Retirement sounds nice, but I think what they really want is financial independence. And so we kind of aim for that.
That's a really good point, actually, because I don't actually have a positive connotation with the term retirement. To me, it kind of sounds like you're just, I mean, this sounds bad, but it sounds like you're old and you're sort of past your prime, and it's time to stop working because you're frail. And I just have this image in my head that isn't super attractive. But when you say financial independence, that does make me considerably more excited about the idea.
Yeah, you asked earlier about is there anyone who doesn't want to be wealthy who comes and talks to me? And I recall a conversation that I had with a client of mine who's I think he's 30, and he makes a lot of money. He's a great investor, very very good at saving, I should say, is what I meant to say. He's a great saver. And, I called him one day and I said, we should make this change. It'll work out just a little bit better for you. It's a little more efficient, whatever it may be. And he said, Adam, I mean, what am I going to do with all this money that I make? I'm going to have more than I need. And so what's the point? And it kind of caught me off guard a little bit. The answer that I said was give it away. And he was all about that. Just kind of a mentality that maybe you're well off in terms of income or just overall financially, you can still do good by being efficient with what you have, even if it is that you have a lot, because the benefactors of it eventually are going to be helped even more. So it's kind of a roundabout way of saying that, yes, some people don't have a desire to be ultra wealthy. They just want to be okay.
No, I think that's really good. Adam, I have another question. In terms of saving, because it seems like, in some sense, as I understand it, saving is the name of the game. Are there any obvious things that you see people doing poorly on a habitual basis, things that are really getting people into trouble in terms of not saving? So I'm not even necessarily asking how do you save well, but how can you sort of, in a preventative sense, save well?
Well, I'm sorry to say, but this answer is going to come as no surprise. Save, I think a goal of 10% of your income, saving 10% of your income is is a great goal for almost everybody. And then budgeting. I mean, it's super simple, but we just need to know where our money goes. You know, other things that fall into this category that are obvious, I think, are credit cards and credit card debt and just managing debt in an appropriate way. But by and large, you know, Dave Ramsey's right. We just got to budget, save a little bit, and not get into ridiculous debt.
So I like what you said in that it seems obvious about credit cards, but I think sometimes when you work in the profession and you live in that world, things become obvious to you that aren't obvious to everyone else. So although it may seem obvious, what is it about credit cards that gets people into so much trouble?
Credit cards are just a trap. I was sent an audio clip of a Dave Ramsey show yesterday, and it was a couple making $230,000, and they have almost $1 million in debt. And something like $210,000 of that was credit card debt. And don't forget, credit card debt is the highest interest debt that you can have. And so,
well, can you give us a comparison? Like, how does it rank? I mean, it's number one, but like, how badly is it number one?
Okay, so if we're getting into technicals, you can borrow to buy a house at, let's say, roughly 3%. The next level up is you can borrow to buy a car at, let's say, roughly 5%. You can borrow to maybe start a business at 6 or 7%. And you can take a personal loan. That varies wildly. But then there's credit card debt, and that's anywhere from 15% to 30%. So you're borrowing at an outrageous price when you don't pay your credit card bill, or when you let the balance carry over. And that's why the people who use credit cards responsibly get some rewards, because you're just making it off the other people.
That's good to know. So that's actually true.
It's a dangerous trap to think that credit cards the rewards are worth it. Don't get me wrong. That's the most often thing that people said they disagree with Dave Ramsey on is the use of credit cards. And while I might agree with that in some cases, half those people that say that don't do it right. So while I might agree with that, I don't really think that it's a good rule of thumb.
And just to be clear, Dave Ramsey is against like all credit card use, right?
Yep.
Cut him
That's
up.
his thing, right?
Dave Ramsey
right.
believes your house should be your only debt.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, that's interesting because I've heard people say, and I think you touched on it, but I want to make sure I heard you right. If you do use credit cards responsibly, then you can sort of win the game, because the money that's being made in the credit card system is coming from the people who are doing it foolishly. And I want to know if that's true generally, or if I'm just wanting it to be true so that I can use my own credit card. Like, for example, let me give you an example. Can I give you an example? How's an example sound?
You can.
Let's do this. So I'll just be really specific. I have a credit card that I really love. I love the customer service. I won't say who they are, but I think Kevin actually recommended this credit card service. And I've been...
So that would be the Discover It card?
Okay, so it's Discover. And I'm wildly happy with my Discover experience. I only buy a few things per month because I was told that, buying a few things per month is what, keeps your credit score peachy and sorting into the 900s. So I want to be that guy. So I'm just buying a few things every month on my credit card. I pay it off on time. It's on auto pay. It feels like a joke. And I do get rewards. And I'm wondering if I'm still secretly losing, and there's like a hub of greedy old men and women laughing at me at whichever headquarters it might be. I just want to know the truth, Adam.
If you're paying it off every single month and never carrying a balance, you're not losing.
Love it. So I am winning the game.
And, it is important to build up a credit profile. An important thing with debt is we are in the midst of the lowest rates we have ever seen. And it's kind of changed the game with debt. So if you ask your grandparents or even your parents, your first house, what was the interest rate on your mortgage? And they might say anywhere from 8 to 14%. And that was the kind of debt that, man, you want to put extra towards principal on that. It's just, it looms over you. You pay the bank so much money just to be able to borrow from them. And we're at a spot now where our government, with the kind of focus on the economy combined with a pandemic has reduced interest rates to the lowest point we've ever seen. And so now we're at a point where people are borrowing money to buy a house at just over 2%. And that is amazingly cheap. And it's shifted the conversation to using debt as a tool, I think, rather than a burden in a lot of cases. So it's an interesting thought, and it's relatively new, I think.
Fair enough. I love that.
Let me ask this. So we have, there's a lot of people listening that might be in one of these situations where they might be in this credit card debt. They might have an absorbent amount of student loan debt, for example. And I feel like much like a person who's overweight that wants to lose weight, it can be a daunting task if you're sitting there looking at this debt that goes away very little every single month. And they might feel like they're stuck. And it's easy to say, well, just save a little bit more. Don't use your credit cards, cut them up. But that's still it's probably a daunting task for them to do that. And then when you look at a person like yourself, who's a financial advisor, they might think that you are exclusively for the guys in the polos on the golf course, and you're moving seven figures around, and they won't be able to utilize a person like yourself. Is that the case? Is there would you recommend that a person beyond the age of college, should they look into a financial advisor or a person in their area or someone that knows a little more than they do, who might actually do you work with people who are in some of these situations?
I think that's an important question, and something that a lot of financial advisors struggle with. You know, I think a lot of financial advisors get into the industry in the hopes of helping people, like what you're saying. How do we help people implement values and personal financial policies, I guess, that prevent catastrophes and just get them so that they don't have to worry about money anymore. And by the nature of the industry, we want the people that have a lot of money and have not worried about money for a long time. And so it is a really tough thing to kind of wrestle with. My personal approach to that is, if I've run into someone who is gung-ho about changing their financial life, I don't care how much money's involved. If you want my advice, I'm happy to give it, is kind of how I've approached it. And I'll work with people for, a couple hours and maybe not make much money from it or any money from it. But to me, it's just the right thing to do. So I'm eager to help people who want to be helped.
Wait a minute, Adam, you said that you think it's the right thing to do. That's interesting. What is the right thing to do in terms of money, in your opinion?
Man, what is the right thing to do with money, period? Or I guess
you can take
question
that
mark.
whichever direction you'd like, but I think Kevin and I, given that this is a legacy podcast, and I know that Kevin has questions loaded in the barrel about legacy and finance, so I don't want to spoil that completely. But I think you touched on something important in that maybe there is a right way and a wrong way to do money, for lack of a better term. And I'd just like to hear you talk about it.
I think that the right way to approach money is to treat it like a resource that you have, just like any other resource. And it's just important to be a good steward with that resource. Money is an avenue to a lot of things, almost everything in our life. And it's just important to treat it. We just have to be good stewards of our money. There are tons of ways to do that. It may be the difference in blowing a lot of money on a new car, or it might be giving money to a charity that you're passionate about, or I don't know. We can just say a lot with our money without opening our mouth.
So one thing that I wonder a lot about on a personal level is to what extent my money is my own. And obviously in a literal sense it is. It's in my bank account. But to what extent on like a universal level should I be investing in myself? And to what ratio should I be investing in others? Others maybe that I know in my life, others maybe that I don't know in my life. And obviously it's impossible to answer this question without tapping into a bigger worldview and how people tend to see how the world turns in general, whether or not being a humanitarian is something that's admirable or whether or not being a narcissist is the way to live your life. But I'm just curious, how, and you don't have to necessarily give your own opinion, but do people tend to want to be generous with their money? Do people tend to hoard it to themselves? Or what tendencies do you see most often?
I suppose I'd say that there's not a right way, and I think that discovering what's important to each individual is a part of the value that I can provide, and kind of tailoring a approach to investing and managing your finances that adheres to what you think is important. And so, one of my favorite parts of being a financial advisor is a kind of first and second appointment with a couple. And more often than not, they talk about money more in that 1 or 2 hours than they have in the last several years combined. And it just prompts exceptional dialogue and thought between usually a husband and wife. And it's just ultra satisfying because you find out usually what's important to my spouse when it comes to our money, and you can tailor what you do in your daily life to kind of help with that.
Something that I feel like I see a lot in my own life is sometimes I want things. Like if you were to give me a quiz, for example. So if you were my financial advisor and you gave me a quiz and you asked me all these questions, Andrew, do you want this to be true of your financial situation when you're 60 years old? I would, of course, say probably yes. But then again, if we rewound to the moment, and this sort of goes back to this gap that Kevin and I were talking about on actually our last episode in terms of your goals and your reality, and there's usually a gap. And what I'm realizing is I'm not actually closing the gap at all. So do you find that when you sit down with couples that a lot of them have just never thought about this kind of thing before?
I think we find that they think about it a lot, but they don't talk about it with each other a lot. And so it's just not a natural conversation for couples to talk about what's your goal with our money 10 years from now. That's just not something that is relevant to a lot of people, particularly when we have so many immediate goals and expenses that have the weight on today. And so to kind of sit back and think long term is just rare to do outside, I think, of a financial advisor's office.
Kevin, I'm sure you have some thoughts on that. People aren't thinking long term. What's up with that?
It relates to dieting. It relates to so many things that we've talked about. It's so easy to make these decisions in the short term. It's so difficult to think about them in the long term, especially financially. When if I were to sit here and think about my retirement, it is decades away. It's difficult for me to get excited about it or to want to put 10% of my money into it because I could buy something that is cool right now with Best Buy. So I think that's why we have so many people in the position that they are in. And I see incredible statistics online of they're scary percentages of the amount of people in the country who have saved less than $5,000 or whatever it is. And you can find others that say the opposite. The millennials have more money than generations before them. So who knows what the actual numbers are? And maybe, Adam, you know some of that. Is the financial future of the millennial generation as bleak as some say it is? Do you think, is that information that you have as far as retirement accounts go for people in their 20s and 30s?
There are all sorts of trends you can look at. I mean, we're finding that amidst the pandemic, millennials are doing a pretty good job of saving during the pandemic. I guess that could be a consequence of just not having near the opportunity to spend money. But
Best Buy's closed.
Right. And the bars and restaurants and whatever it may be. But there's also this trend of 50 years ago, if you went and worked for a company, you were kind of given a pension, a retirement fund. And now you have to voluntarily say, okay, I want part of my money to go towards my retirement. And that's just a difficult thing. I mean, it's hard to see that voluntarily leave your paycheck. And I think that it's understandable compared to a couple generations before us when a lot of them, the company was just putting into an account that will pay them a monthly income for life when they retire. Yes, I think that financial situations for millennials are probably a little worse off, but I don't think that we should say it's their fault necessarily.
Sure. So let's talk about the stock market a little bit. I feel like you said, previous generations, you get the pension, you work at the same company for 50 years. You don't really think about it. You retire, everything's as expected. These days, you put a little bit more of that into your own hands. You have to make some of these decisions. The stock market it's a big topic. The president will come out and say stock market hits an all-time high, and people will say, well, the stock market isn't indicative of real life. 401ks are going up. The stock market is composed of some pretty large companies that employ a lot of people. What is the stock market? What does it mean when it's at 30,000, but 300 million people are locked in their homes? Is it something that the average person should have a pulse on every day? Does it matter? What are your thoughts on the stock market and day trading? And I know it's more popular now probably than it ever has been. It's almost as easy and fun to do as fantasy football. It's like going to Vegas, but it's right there on your phone. So what are your thoughts on the current state of the stock market?
Yeah, what a great question. I mean, this year, my client appointments have just been, when we're reviewing investments, it's been almost bizarre. You know, when we talk about performance, almost always we're talking about, my goodness, this year we're seeing now greater than ever that the economy and the stock market are just not the same thing. And if you have had investments in 2020 that have been appropriately invested, and we'll get into that in a second, then you've made money, likely. And sometimes it's felt guilty this year when we have family members that are losing their jobs. We have, well, just lots of job loss. And we see people left and right who can't even afford to think about investing money, let alone making money on their investments. The stock market is very different from the economy, and it's perhaps never been highlighted greater than it has been this year. Because when we think about the stock market of today, it is so highly concentrated to internet companies, which have largely been the benefactors of COVID, or maybe the companies that haven't hurt because of COVID. The stock market is pretty far from Main Street. So almost all the guests that you've had that maybe own a business in Colombia, they're just so far from what the stock market is, because when there's no customers out and about, they hurt. And most of the companies in the stock market don't. And when we think about the largest companies in the stock market, what moves the stock market, they are Amazon, Facebook, Google, and Microsoft, Apple, and the like. And so that's really what the stock market is large companies and how they perform. And this year it's felt guilty that they've done so well, I think.
I go back and forth on how I feel about it, because I like to think I have a pulse on some of the tech companies and the decisions that they make. And then just the other day, I came across a story of Solar Wind, the company that was hacked by whatever, who knows yet. But they said there were a handful of investors who sold hundreds of millions of shares of Solar Wind before that story became public and the stock crashed. And when you see stories like that, you realize we're not playing the same game on our couch as the other people who are inside. So like, what are we actually? We don't really, there's no way to know enough to be on the same playing field as the people on the inside. And if that's the case, then what's the point? It really is at that point kind of gambling.
I think it's an important question. What you just described, I had not heard of, but
it might be illegal, and in which case the whole question's irrelevant. They'll probably investigate it. But
Kevin read it on Twitter, and it's actually not real. So this is awkward.
It could be just completely fake.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that if what I understand it is correct, then it was probably illegal and is kind of a one-off case. But I think it's important to ask, because by and large, my job is not to help you pick stocks. It's my job to allocate your money in asset classes that have proven long-term returns. So we might say that it's important for us to invest in large U.S. tech companies, but mitigate the risk of any one company, kind of being disastrous to your portfolio. So it's a long way of saying that we need to be diversified with our investments. And, any financial advisor does not have a crystal ball for what stocks are going to be winners and losers. There are theories out there that the market is always priced appropriately and no one has proprietary information, and if they do, it's illegal. So
right.
That's not really my job to pick stocks. That being said, we own individual stocks, and I think that it's perfectly fine to, if you have a desire to literally own part of a company that you think is you believe in their vision, you believe in their mission, then I'm all about it. And you might ask me, are we getting in at a good price or not? The answer is going to be, I don't know. But if it's important for you to own it, then we can own it. And it'll just be a complement to whatever we're doing elsewhere.
Got it. I got one more question related to more of the short-term investing world. Yesterday, I read a thread on Twitter from one of the OG Bitcoin founding guys. And he said, I think it was 2009, he sold tens of thousands of Bitcoin. And that would have made him over $1 billion in 10 years, which is an unbelievable, unthinkable return. And my first thought was how difficult it would be to go to sleep some nights just thinking about that. But obviously the guy's coped with the fact that he saw $1 billion and he doesn't have it. Now you see that on different levels from different people all the time. Investments that you could have done, selling too early, buying too late. How do you mentally cope with risk, reward, and regret in the financial world?
I think it's important that we don't play Monday morning quarterback with our investments. When we choose to make investments, we are looking forward, and then when we choose to, make a change in that investment, it's driven by doing what's right for us. So this person that would have had $10 billion worth of Bitcoin, imagine how stressed they'd be if they did have 99.999% of their assets in Bitcoin. At that point, that would be awfully stressful to me, especially when Bitcoin's fluctuating by, tens of percent every day. We just have to invest appropriately and know that some things are going to win and some things are going to lose, and hopefully we hang on to the ones that win. But
do you own any Bitcoin, Adam?
Heck no. I don't understand it.
I don't either.
I was going to ask what it is, but I didn't want to sound like an idiot on my own podcast.
It doesn't make any sense to me. It's like fake money that's worth.
Okay, that's what I thought it was. I thought it was like Monopoly money.
Let's start our own fake money and tell people it's worth $10,000 a share.
That's genius. I mean, come on. You can't touch that guy. Whoever that guy was, unbelievable.
Yeah,
well done.
One FinalVibe coin is $30,000. If you want one, just email me.
Send you a paper certificate for it.
For sure. Let's shift gears just a little bit. Less on the specifics of investing, more on you personally, Adam. We have listeners of all age, but we do have some listeners that are in the college age range thinking about life and what they want to do. You are a younger person in your 20s, but your work requires you to do a lot of face-to-face with people of all ages. And sometimes you have conversations with legit seniors about a majority of what they own, a majority of their assets, and they're going to trust you to manage that, which is a big thing to do. Do you have advice for a person who is about to graduate or wants to move into a different career, but feels like they don't have the knowledge or the confidence quite yet to be successful in that field, if that makes sense?
I would say that if you don't feel like you have the knowledge or the confidence to get into the field, you probably never will. I mean, you just got to step in at some point. And if you commit to doing something 5 years later, or whatever it may be, I mean, that's just wasted time. And I was listening to the last podcast just before hopping on here, and you referenced a quote that you shared about wasted time. If you don't jump on an opportunity now, then the time that you wait is just wasted.
Well, and the time will pass anyway. If you're considering doing something, that time is going to pass whether you do the thing or not. So why not just do it?
Right. I agree with that. And in my industry, I mean, yeah, I the bulk of my clients are 60 plus, and I have to portray confidence that I do know what I'm doing and handling their nest egg. But I think that comes from them being confident in me that I know what's important to them, and that I'm not going to make any recommendations that aren't catered to them or appropriate to them. And so, much like any relationship, it comes down to trust. Just time in the game, building trust. I don't think that it's that much of a function of how old you are. It's just getting to it and getting started.
I think you make a really good point about tailoring your clients' needs to the way that you obviously interact with them, because that's something I wrestle with a lot when it comes to diet and exercise. And tell me if you relate to this, but sometimes people will tell you things that you don't necessarily agree with. People might have goals that don't necessarily align with your own goals. And yet you sort of have to remove yourself from that situation and provide a professional service. And you have to learn how to communicate well, respectably, and sort of walk with them along that journey, even if it's not something that you are specifically passionate about. Do you find that that's tough, or do you find that it's really just a refined skill, both socially and professionally in the money world?
I see what you're saying, and I do think it's tough. I think that one of the most important skills anyone who is in the business of managing relationships can have is empathy, and being empathetic, even if you don't agree with it, or if you'd rather see them do something different. But if you can have empathy and portray that, and just be kind of committed to doing what is right for them, then you're going to be kosher.
Cool. Give the people what they want. I love it.
Yeah.
Adam, does money buy happiness?
To an extent, yes, but not. Things don't buy happiness. Things that we buy with our money do not buy happiness. There's certainly a value of financial security, and just knowing that when things come up, emergencies, if money is not going to be a stressor in that situation, then yes, that's going to bring a little bit of happiness, in my opinion.
I think that's a solid answer. I'd be curious to know what you guys think about this. So I've often wonder if I am a greedy person, and I wonder if I care too much about myself, too much about my own money, my own financial capacity. But then I look out into the world and I see that it's essentially a non-negotiable reality that life is easier when there's a little bit more money in the bank. And when I think about being a parent, do I want my kid to be able to go to the cool basketball camp? Not because going to the basketball camp is going to make them happy for a lifetime, but just because it's an opportunity and you want to be able to give your children opportunities. Or, are there ways that you could give to people in need because you have more money? But I wonder often if I'm still being selfish and thinking that if I have more money, I'll just be more generous. And I'm wondering, do you guys ever wrestle with that thought?
Definitely. If I don't give now, I'll be able to give so much more later. That type of mentality. But my goodness, what a great thing for the mind and soul to just be generous. Generosity to me is just an attitude. You got to develop it and practice it. And I think, as we probably know, if you do that, the right things are going to fall into place, kind of regardless. But I hear your question, and I know that's everyone struggles with it. It's hard to. Well, so here's a scenario. What if I've got a client who wants to give $10,000 to something, and they know that when they give it to a church, let's say, it's going to sit in a cash account for a year, whereas they know that while it's invested in their own name, it's making 7 or 8%, and that might be something to wrestle with. But when we give it's important to kind of be unconditional with gifts to an extent. So
No, I think it was good. You took the word unconditional right out of my mouth, because I think, and this is not something I've thought about before, I'm just saying it live while we're recording this, but it seems like generosity cannot exist apart from unconditional intent. It doesn't seem like you can truly be generous without that. I think it defies the true sense of generosity when you do have a bit of an agenda outside of purely giving to something else.
I agree with you. It's kind of a decision of to what level do you want to be, I guess, unconditional or conditional. You know, what about scholarships? So I've been lucky enough to help some clients set up scholarships, and those often have criteria for maybe who gets them and who can maintain them, or even on another level, you know, maybe we choose what charities we give to when we could just give to the United Way, and the United Way kind of picks what charities they go to. It's a level of how unconditional you want to be, I guess. But you're right. At the core of every gift, there is some level of it being unconditional.
Sure. Well, and I'm not even really concerned with being right. I was just more bouncing ideas off of people, and really for my own mind and my own heart to know that I know for sure that for my legacy, I don't want to be the guy who was tight-fisted, and I don't want to be the guy who said no to opportunities to give when somebody was in legitimate need. And I think if anything will make me cringe when I'm older, it will be the thought of not having given as much as I could have. And so I appreciate you guys bearing with my thoughts.
I think COVID, as terrible as it has been a unique opportunity for everybody to slow down a little bit. And then we've seen incredible stories of what generosity from average, normal, everyday people, the impact that can have in a community. And so, I mean, I feel like that happens all the time. I feel like it's happening more now than ever because people need help more than ever. So you're seeing people give, and then the impact that has. I think that's been one positive that has stemmed from the last however long it's been is some of those really special stories.
Yeah, I just have to share. So the Sedalia community, I think it's been 2 weeks now, lost to COVID a man who was just largely described as generous, and he was a business owner in town, and I did not know him personally, and when he died, everyone knew it, and if you looked on social media, every single non-for-profit in the community made a post about this man and how dearly he would be missed and how generous he was. And while I didn't know him personally, I observed him, and I know that he gave more than money. He was creative in the ways that he gave. He gave a lot of his time. He gave, he just gave in so many ways. And I think that that's a goal for a lot of people, and probably a lot of people that are listening to something like this. When we talk about this idea of financial independence, I think that it can be defined as being in a position financially to do whatever you want with your time. And he had reached that, and he did whatever he wanted with his time, and it was serving. And so I think that it was a great testament. His life was a great testament to just serving and giving back. And I don't know, I thought it was an appropriate time to share about him. And it was a good example for me. I would like to be in his shoes, giving as a full-time job.
That's awesome. It's big time legacy vibes.
I mean, That is amazing. And to me, it speaks so powerfully to story. And like if you want to influence me in terms of money, tell me a story like that, because that hits so much harder to me than any textbook or any sort of financial propaganda that might suggest that if you do this, you'll get this when you're this age. And although that does sound nice, telling me that 30-second to a minute story, so much more powerful. And again, it's like the fried egg sandwich. This guy's going to go on living in my memory, and I never met the guy. And all because he was generous to people he never even met. So crazy stuff.
Absolutely.
So, Adam, on the topic of legacy, what are ways that we can tie finances to legacy? And when we think about our lives beyond, post, we're gonna pass away someday. We can do things today, make decisions today that will have a lasting impact. What does that mean to you? And what do we need to know about financial legacy?
Financial legacy can mean a ton of different things to a lot of different people. Financial legacy to some people can mean generational wealth. Paying for an education for great grandkids someday, or something like that, or putting your family in a position where your heirs for a long time will just never have to worry about money. I think that's one way to think about financial legacies. I think, though, that much more practical and important are thinking about the position that your family will be in if and when something happens to you. So in every client relationship, we're not afraid to talk about death, as I know you guys aren't on this podcast either. So we talk about, let's say that you died. What are your heirs going through? Maybe it's your spouse or your kids. And how can we make that process so that the finances aren't a burden? So that gets into life insurance, yes. Making sure that there's enough money there for whoever may be. But we also talk about just not leaving a financial mess for your heirs. Do you have a will? Do you have power of attorney set up? Do you have just things that are in place so that there aren't added stressors on your heirs who might be grieving? So that's kind of an important thing too, in terms of a financial legacy, is just doing things now that you're never going to benefit from, but someone else will, which we talk about all the time on this podcast, I know, or you do. So
yeah, that's an interesting thought, because we've talked about how difficult it is to make decisions that will benefit you. Now we're talking about decisions that 100% no chance they benefit you, but they 100% they will benefit those closest to you, which might be more motivating than saving. Can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And other things that might include is, we probably all think about, I need to catalog my usernames and passwords for someone in case I die, or who has the other key to my safety deposit box, or whatever it might be. But it might bring you a quite deal of comfort to organize that stuff. Just thinking that if something happens to me, my family, my heirs are going to have an opportunity to grieve, and that just be that. And I didn't leave them in a situation where they have to stress about things that are unnecessary.
Adam, let's talk about your personal legacy.
What's in your wallet? Totally kidding, Kevin. You go. You go.
What's in my wallet?
I'm kidding, Kevin. Go ahead. I interrupted, and I'm super sorry.
You're fine. That was funny. Your personal legacy. How old are you?
I am 28.
28. You have a daughter who is how old?
1. Just over 1.
Just over 1. A wife. That's a lot of life changes in a short amount of time. So that's a lot of perception changes. What does legacy mean to you at 28 years old?
Good question. In listening to you guys talk about legacy, and I particularly enjoyed, an episode you had about how do you FinalVibe in the workplace and things like that. My goodness, I just want to say your perception will change when you have a child. But it's so true. Having a daughter, yes, it is next to impossible to plan out every minute of my day. Like, it's probably more possible for you right now, but it doesn't have any effect, though, on how important it is to be focused on legacy, I guess. So this morning, I took my daughter out and we went shopping for kind of a daddy-daughter date. She's young enough that it won't matter. She's young enough that she won't remember it.
Excuse you.
She's young enough that she won't remember it, but those are just awesome times, I'm excited about time with my daughter and times that she will remember. And that's kind of where my legacy is focused right now. It's family and it's my daughter, and it's just what's important to me. And it's only going to become more important, I know. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
It absolutely does. I will say it was pretty special when I was typing out the intro and I wrote husband, comma, father. That's pretty cool.
it is cool.
Well, it's cool because, X amount of years ago, you, I, all three of us, we were all buzzing around the University of Missouri campus, and we never thought that one day we would be 28, 29, and 30.
Yeah.
And yet here we are. And I think you said it really well, Adam, that your perception of legacy will absolutely change with different seasons of life. And I hope that my perspective only gets more and more mature as I age. And it is exciting to see you be a dad. And I don't think I ever told you congratulations, but you seem to be killing the fatherhood game. And I think Kevin and I wish you the best.
I appreciate it. It's it is ultra rewarding, and it's also a lot of work.
That seems to be the consensus.
Yeah. But
it does seem to be the case that the things that are worth having in life are difficult to obtain.
imagine that.
Imagine that. Kevin, where do we take it from here? Do we lighten things up? What do we
Let's
do?
lighten things
You're
up.
the
I think
host.
we're at 60 plus minutes. Let's have a little bit of fun, get to know Adam a little more personally, and then maybe wrap things up.
I think a really fun question to launch this aspect of the discussion would be, Kevin, Mizzou plays Mississippi State in a few hours.
Yes.
Now, by the time people are listening to this officially, we will already know the finale. But Adam, what are your hot takes?
Ooh, what are my hot takes?
You see us pulling this one out.
My hot take on this upcoming game this afternoon is, and I guess a prediction is, the game will be considered over by the start of the fourth quarter. Mizzou will be so far ahead that we can relax, maybe carry on regular conversations with our family members during the game in the fourth quarter, and it'll just be stress-free.
Love it.
That's happened like half a dozen times in the last 10 years, but maybe. I'm just kidding. I like that prediction. I think we're wearing all white. You got to take that into account. Yeah, so you're probably right. They say, I know it's the gold pants. The gold pants, clear eyes can't lose. We'll see what happens with the all whites. I think we win the game, finish the season, go out on a bang. Did you say a score prediction, Adam? Just a high number to a low number?
I'm tempted to say that we win by 1.5 just because that's what Vegas says. But let's say the prediction is that we win by 10, and it was not that close for most of the game.
I'm going to go, Kevin, if you don't mind. I'm going to throw mine in here. I'm going to go 31-17 Tigers.
Wow. I think it might be a little closer. They have a home game. Not sure what the weather's going to be. 35-28.
That'd be nice. I just like that for a little bit more scoring.
Yeah.
It'd be a fun game. How about we go like 55-48?
Yeah,
that'd be fun.
Those are fun games.
Those are fun games. Give me a show. I want a show.
I'll watch through the fourth quarter.
I'm bored. Adam, is there anything that you buy on a regular basis that makes no sense? Do you stop by Starbucks and buy a foo-foo drink every morning? Do you buy a protein shake after every single workout when you could buy them in bulk on Amazon? Is there anything that you do that you're embarrassed about? Expose yourself.
What's your guilty hobby? Is it golf? Do you have a lot of expensive golf
what's your guilty
stuff?
investment?
Yes. Golf is probably my guilty hobby.
You buy fancy pink golf balls? Adam, how do you feel about all the FinalVibe merchandise? Are you getting pretty excited? I see you kind of squirming in your seat here across Zoom, and I'm wondering if it's because of all the apparel that we have coming down the pipe.
Man, I have inquired about the hats. I am interested about the hats. I also have purchased a couple bags of the coffee. Have not picked them up yet. I wanted the free shipping, so I committed to going and picking them up. But yeah, I mean, the merch looks good.
Which hat would you want? Would you like the athletic hat or the snapback? I might be able to hook you up since we're getting. I'll see you here soon. And as FinalVibe member 16, by the way, I checked.
Oh, okay, 16.
Yeah, and since you're on the podcast, the least I could do. What hat would you prefer?
I probably am not much of a snapback kind of guy, so
gotcha.
Let's go with
I'll
the
get you the one that'll
athletic
look good on the it'll look good on the golf course. And for those listening, probably too late now to get any FinalVibe merch before Christmas. But if you're into New Year's gifts, it's available now. FinalVibe.com/shop. Adam, what's your favorite fast food restaurant in Sedalia?
Man, I was hoping you'd ask that, and you even alluded to it earlier. It is Mr. Goodcents.
That's your favorite.
Yeah. It is
Nice.
my go-to when I need something quick.
It's just so good.
You know, it's funny you said that because, Kevin, when you said Mr. Goodcents, I was trying to figure out if that was like a thrift shop or if it was a sandwich place. So I'm thinking it's a sandwich place.
Very few people will probably know what it is, but those who do will understand that Columbia to Sedalia for Mr. Goodcents isn't that crazy of a drive because it is that good.
If you know, you know.
If you know, you know. There used to be one in Columbia. Now it is like a Verizon or something, and it's no longer here.
It's delicious. They have the best bread and the freshest toppings. Can't recommend it enough.
So, Adam, I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge you on what you've just said. So sometimes people say things about food, about very bland foods, and they say they have the best bread, or they have the best water, or they have the best potatoes. And I'd like to demand what you mean, because bread, although can be very delicious, what are you even saying that they have the best bread?
It's a fair question. I think that I describe Mr. Goodcents bread as it's fresh baked every day. And I think that the taste of it is in between Subway and Jimmy John's. And I mean that on mainly a sweetness level. Jimmy John's is very sweet, but Subway is almost bland in my opinion. And it's a nice happy medium. It's always, you can tell that it was baked that day. It's as good as it gets.
16-inch Sensible, I believe it's called, with mayo. I think that's what I get. The Sensible? Maybe that's wrong.
Kevin, do you know how many grams of fat are in one serving of mayonnaise?
I don't want you to even tell me.
Okay, yeah, we'll talk about it later. Adam, how many grams of protein do you eat per day, would you say?
I have no idea.
Would you say it's above 200? Probably.
I think it's much less than 200.
Okay, fair enough. I tried to trap you there and you deflected, so well done.
Success.
Okay, what about a typical breakfast, though? You told us that you get Mr. Goodcents every day for lunch and dinner. What about breakfast? What about that elusive third meal of the day?
Well, breakfast I'm in charge of for my daughter, so usually it's throwing whatever we have around at her because she is a bottomless pit. But eggs are a commonplace for sure. We go through a lot of eggs.
Very good. Are you an egg snob, or are you willing to do those really Sunny D colored peasant yolks from Walmart? Are you willing to do that? Or are you more of an egg snob, maybe taking the organic route?
We are very blessed to have a friend who I meet with weekly, and in that meeting he always brings a dozen eggs, farm fresh. So
whoa.
And they are $2 a dozen, so can't be
I
beat.
love those types of stories about I want a relationship like that.
Yeah.
Like an egg guy, or that's pretty cool.
Well, Kevin, it's interesting you say that because I think there are people in our circles that do that. I think we're just not tapping into the potential.
Yeah, we need to tap
I
into 'em.
smell a future episode on the horizon.
I do think that the solution is not to have your own chickens. That is not a dream of
I don't
mine.
think. Yeah, I don't think Kevin was ever considering a chicken.
No, I want to get coffee with a guy once a week that then also gives me a dozen eggs. That's what I'm looking for.
So speaking of chickens, Adam, I have a feeling that you are a man who probably appreciates Chick-fil-A just as much as we do. And if so, give us your order and how many times you're willing to eat there in a single day.
Well, my order is a spicy deluxe, and then I take off the pickles and eat them after I've eaten the sandwich. I don't really like pickles on sandwiches, but I like pickles. So
Yeah, that makes sense.
I guess I would eat there as many times as I am hungry during the course of a day.
Fair enough. You can't argue with that answer.
No, you can't. Okay, last question maybe. Adam, what is one practical piece of advice that you personally do that a person could implement to start saving money today? Whether that's at the grocery store, whether that's when you're looking at Christmas presents, whatever it is, what's something that you guys do in your household to save some money?
You have to give me a second on this one.
I'm going with intermittent fasting.
That's a great answer.
Actually, that is kind of a good answer. I think we save a lot of money in making our own meals. So eating out is quite the treat for us. So I think that's a pretty good answer. I don't know that we set aside money that we would otherwise spend on a restaurant, but there's a lot of value in making your own food, just in making it yourself and making it together. There's a lot of value other than just saving money. So
perfect
I
answer.
love it. That's a homegrown answer. Cheers. Make your own food, people. Save some cash, money, save some Bitcoin.
But also support small business and small restaurants right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Kevin, I think we've had a lovely episode with Adam. Why don't you thank him for his time today? I think you should do that. It doesn't make any sense if I do it.
It doesn't. No, I don't think anyone will understand. Adam, thank you so much for joining us this morning remotely before Christmas on the FinalVibe podcast. We have wanted to have you on. I'm excited that we were finally able to make it happen.
Well, I appreciate it. It was a lot of fun and been wanting to do it myself. So thanks for asking me.
Perfect.
For sure. Maybe we'll do it again sometime in person, in studio, when it's not a crazy thing to do that.
A true win-win for everyone else. Kevin, what if you give us the iconic FinalVibe outro? Only you know how to do it. It would be laughable if I tried. Would you do that for us?
I think one time you should, but not today. I'll take care of it. Here we go. Don't forget, everybody, if you are looking to change your life and focus more on your own legacy, a FinalVibe membership provides you with an immediate access to a community of people doing just that, as well as other exclusive content. Today's episode was produced by co-host Andrew White. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to future episodes and tell your friends about us. We appreciate all of the support that we have received so far, and we ask that you give us 5 stars on the iTunes store if you could. We hope to see you online. FinalVibe is on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at FinalVibe, and you can see our website, apparel, coffee, shop, blog, and so much more at FinalVibe.com. Enjoy the rest of your week. Merry Christmas to those celebrating it. We will see you back here next Tuesday for another episode. Thank you so much for listening.
What's up, guys? This is officially a hostage situation. Just kidding. It's Andrew from the FinalVibe podcast, and I just wanted to say that if the audio today was at all unsatisfactory to you, we just wanted to apologize. We were doing our best with the remote situation. You guys know how it can be. Zoom can be a bit fuzzy at times, so we do appreciate your patience, and we wanted you to know that we are always committed to the best audio quality that we can possibly provide, whether we are in the FinalVibe studio, podcasting in a van on the way to Chicago, or anywhere else. So thank you guys so much for listening. Have a happy holidays, a Merry Christmas, and a Happy New Year.